Here on the Mentor Pilot channel. As always, I hope you're doing absolutely fantastic. So today I have yet another great guest that I'm going to interview. I've been looking forward to this. I mean, this is a person who's been running YouTube channels longer than I have. And if you've been following his YouTube channel, you have basically been following him from when he was a budding cadet, someone who just wanted to become a pilot, all the way through his kind of journey in between the different airlines that he's been working for and where he is now, which is a fully grown up airline pilot flying for one of the regionals in the United States. So without further ado, by the way, before we start kicking off, remember that there is going to be a lot of people here. There always is, and there's always a lot of questions coming in, and it's going to be a little bit hard to keep following all of the questions here. So if you have something that you really want to ask me or my guest today, then please use the super chat. Right, the super chat will donate a little bit of money to support the work that I'm doing with the channel, but it will also highlight the question, which makes it much easier for me to see it. So if there's something that you want to ask, then keep going, and I will try to get all of these super chat questions in between the questions that I have myself. So without further ado, I want to introduce Swayne Martin. How are you, man?
Hey guys, how are you doing?
Oh,
Good.
I am great, and I am so happy to have you here on the channel. How long have you been running your YouTube channel now?
Man, it's been a long time. I essentially started the YouTube channel, as you mentioned, when I started flight training. So even back when I was 15 years old. So let's see, I guess that would be about 8 years now. But in terms of the actual growth, I guess, with the YouTube channel, it's really been sort of focused for the past 3 years. I'd say that's been like the bulk of sort of when I started finding the messaging that I wanted. But yeah, 8 years ago when I started as a first brand new flight student, that's when I started making videos. So.
It's really cool because I get, right now I get a lot of messages, a lot of emails and stuff from people who are just where you were when you started off, as in just about to start their flight training. They want to make a YouTube channel out of it, and it's fun to see someone like yourself who actually did exactly that and has been following through all the way up until, well, now where you're flying as a fully fettered airline pilot.
Right.
And by the way, guys, if you haven't checked out Swayne's channel, then I have a link here in the description of the video, so you can just go over there and check out his great videos after this. So where are you right now?
I'm in Chicago, so I live here in Chicago, Illinois. And I'm also based here with Envoy, the company that I fly for, which is an American Airlines regional airline.
Okay.
Yeah, so I live and I'm based in Chicago.
Cool. Now, I've been looking through your channel, obviously, as I do with all my guests before they come onto the channel. And I was really inspired by the beginning messaging, but throughout your channel, you have had a constant messaging of pretty much what I'm trying to do, which is positive, constructive descriptions of how people are supposed to get into the role of an airline pilot. Right. And you are working as well. It says on all of your social media accounts that you are an editor for
Bold Method. Yep, Bold Method pilot training.
Bold Method. Can you tell me a little bit what is that actually? Because I'm trying to get my head around it.
Yeah, so Bold Method, actually, it's a really interesting story. So my two business partners, Alex and Colin, if you guys have checked out Bold Method online, we're a pilot training company. We produce pilot training software. There's courses for pilots for things like national airspace in the United States, how to do takeoffs and landings properly. And then we have free daily content for pilots as well. Articles, quizzes, lists, things that you can read every single day and get new updates for. That's all free and available on the website. Alex and Colin are two of my business partners. They actually both went to the University of North Dakota. We're about 2 decades ahead of me, so they're a little bit older than I am. But they brought me on board to start working with them at Bold Method when I was in high school. So right as I was starting the training process and they wanted to create a training-based company and website, they started bringing me on board to do some small writing and freelance here and there to sort of show the training experience, since I was going through all of it firsthand. Okay. And then once I got a little bit older, I became a business partner with them and have kind of been doing that since with the company. So that's sort of like another third little piece of what I do. It's like YouTube, airline pilot, and Bold Method. Those are my big three, I guess.
Yeah, no, it's very similar to what I'm trying to achieve as well, which is why I asked about it, because especially now when people are stuck at home and they want to try to reinvent themselves, they want to try to improve on the skills they have. It's really important to have access to that kind of online stuff. So, well done.
Yeah, it's great. And I mean, especially like another one that, and you were mentioning younger people and people who are interested in flying. If you're not able to take flight lessons yet, if you're in a country where you can't start until you're a cadet, Bold Method and those resources that we provide, it's a good way of learning some of the ground knowledge, and it's a way that you can sort of start teaching yourself those skills before you're even able to start flight training. So I always recommend if people can check it out. It's a great way to do it.
Yeah, that is great, because I actually I'm constantly looking for sources for that, because I do get a lot of questions from people who are like 12, 13, 14 years old, and they all ask the same thing.
You might not be ready to start flight training quite yet, but there's nothing wrong with learning the ground knowledge, the aerodynamics, the regulations, all that stuff. You can start as early as you want.
Yeah, so excellent. No, that's what I'm trying to tell people as well. The earlier you start, especially if you can keep the flame glowing, the better it is for you. So how come you decided to become an airline pilot? Because you started very early, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, I did start young. I started flying when I was 15. I didn't actually have anybody in my family who was a pilot, so I'm the first one in my family who's ever been involved in aviation at all. And actually, interestingly enough, I knew that I wanted to be a pilot, right? I knew I wanted to be a professional pilot. I didn't actually know that I wanted to be an airline pilot until I was in college. So for the longest time, I really imagined starting my career by doing something that was a little more adventurous, like bush flying or corporate, or something that would be a little more diverse than airline flying.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I was able to get, I'm sure we'll talk about it, like a little piece of that when I flew for the airline in Hawaii. But as I progressed and the way the industry was developing, especially at that time, it was a really great opportunity for me to go ahead and get involved in the airlines, because as a young person, even the industry is obviously changing and things like that at the current moment. Even a year ago, the progress that you can make so quickly going to an airline at a very young age is extremely appealing, and getting that jet experience.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's interesting, because the journey that you guys go through in the United States is very different from what we do here in Europe. I had CV Lemoyne on. He was the last guy that was interviewed here on the channel, and we were talking about, because he is already flying for one of the majors, and he came from the Air Force and he went in through that way. And I said that, listen, we're going to have Swayne Martin on interviewing next time. And he obviously knew your channel as well. So he said, well, so that we have a guy who's gone in through the regionals. Before we get there, it just came to you, did it? Did you just decided that you thought it was cool?
Well, it was, I guess beyond me starting the flight training, I had two grandparents, two grandfathers who were both really interested in aviation. Neither were pilots, but I kind of grew up with them taking me to air shows, building models for me, things like that. And that sort of sparked, a lot of people talk about how when you become a pilot, you always had this sort of interest, or like you had this spark when you were a kid oftentimes. And for me, that was through my grandparents that sort of got me involved in doing some of those things. And then when I was in high school, I remember I had a really great group of friends, and all of them were really good at the things they were doing, like captain of the soccer team, captain of the tennis team, things like that. And I had no idea what I was really good at. I didn't find anything that I was really good at compared to my friends. And I was like, what can I do that's unique? Yeah. And for me, I always knew that I had that passion for aviation. So that's how I kind of started. And that's what kind of pushed me to take my first few lessons.
Yeah, cool. Because, I mean, you must have been one of the early aviation YouTubers as well, given that, it was 8 years ago when you started. I started 4 years ago, and I was in the forefront of the aviation YouTubers. So you must be pretty.
There were really, that right around 8 years ago, that's when the first GoPros were being made. Yeah. Things like that were smaller, like action cameras, things like that. So with me and some friends, when we started filming and flying with them, it was one of the first examples out there, I guess, of people who were trying to bring the aviation world into YouTube. So
yeah, very cool. Kudos. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
So you went to, which school did you say that you went to in the States when you took your licenses?
My first school that I went to, it was actually, I'm from Richmond, Virginia, and I went to just a local flight school, sort of like just a small local training school. And then I went to the University of North Dakota in their aerospace program for my college degree, which was also coupled with flight training. So
Very cool.
UND.
So
Yeah.
you got a like a is that a 3 or 4 year degree together with?
It's a 4-year degree. Yeah, it was a Bachelor of Science and Aeronautical Science degree. So it was, they call it a commercial aviation major. So it was a combination of normal coursework and flight training and that sort of thing.
Because that's important to remember. I get a lot of questions about whether or not you need a degree or not. But in Europe, it's a little bit more lax when it comes to that. But in America, there's still quite a few of the majors that requires you to have a degree in order for you to be able to apply to them. Isn't that right?
Yes, it is right. The other side of that is some majors are some of the larger carriers in the US. They might not have the requirement for the degree,
Hmm.
but the preference for selection in terms of candidates, you get a lot of points sort of in their system for hiring when you do have a degree. So even if it's not required anymore the way that it used to be, I still recommend it.
Yeah.
If college is not something that's really interesting to you, there are other airlines out there where, for instance, my carrier, when you're hired at one of the American Airlines regionals, Envoy, PSA, or Piedmont, we sort of have a track to American Airlines one day.
Yeah.
And you don't have to have a degree at all for that. So, um,
That's
there are other tracks and other opportunities out there.
So, so you did your training, you got your license and everything, and then it's time to hour build. And I guess you still had to comply with the 1,500 hour rule, did you?
It was reduced to 1,000 because I did my degree through UND Aerospace. So I was a restricted ATP, which means that I could get my ATP license when I was 21, and then also at 1,000 hours because I'd done the degree program.
Yeah, you see,
So slightly reduced.
yeah, and
Yeah.
that's another point I wanted to draw out that the 1,500 hour rule is there as a general rule, but there are a few schools around. I don't know how many
Mhm.
there are, but there are like 5 or 7 or something like that that have that reduced.
There's quite a few actually that are, if it's a Part 141 accredited aviation degree program,
Yeah.
I'd say there's a few dozen of them actually that
Really?
have the exemption to be able to get down to 1,000 hours.
Okay.
There's a few other programs where it's like 1,250, so somewhere in the middle. It just sort of depends, but there are quite a few of them actually if
Oh, very good.
you can find them. But it is a part in the US, it's a Part 141 training school, so a very dedicated training program versus something that's like a local flight school.
Cool. So, how did you hour build? That's interesting to know.
Yeah. Yeah, so it was kind of a combination. A lot of people, they get their hours in a big combination of ways. For me, it was a few things. When I was in UND, obviously the flight training program, it probably got me about 250 hours or so of total training time, and that was just requirements, excuse me, to go through and get my certificates and ratings. And then I also did things like I leased an airplane with friends where we shared the cost per hour. I rented airplanes. I flew with friends. I had two amazing people that I grew up sort of flying with as mentors down in Alabama, that took me on trips and would instruct. So, like, for instance, I had a friend, Rod Kellogg and Haley Howard, who they introduced me all sorts of amazing flying opportunities. Rod was a Part 91 pilot. He would fly single pilot in a King Air, and he was also an MEI. So he would log instruction with me sometimes when he would take me on trips, and that would, a long trip. We did a trip to Nicaragua in the King Air. We flew from Alabama through Belize down to Nicaragua, and that was like a 30-hour, 20-hour trip or something like that in total. So that was another way of building flight time. But the most substantial way of me getting time from about 500 hours through 1,000 hours was flying for Mokulele Airlines in Hawaii, which was a Part 135 airline. So that was the bulk of it, I'd
Cool.
say.
So tell me about that. So you is that like it's a Part 131 operation, so that's exempt from the 1,500 rule. It's only when you get up to 141 that you start that you need the 15.
Yeah, so it's the yeah, just slightly different than it's Part 135 is the airline code for these. It's a charter airline essentially.
Okay.
In our case, it was a scheduled charter company. So yeah, all the very very basic requirement to fly is just your commercial pilot's license and an instrument rating.
All right.
In the Cessna Caravan, you don't have to have special type rating for the airplane, obviously. So really, it was just your commercial pilot's license and an instrument rating. Based on the company's, the way they hire, it could be slightly higher hour times that they're looking for in terms of like insurance requirements. But yeah, the 135 track versus the Part 121 airlines, which are like the larger airlines, like the one that I fly for, they don't have the same hour requirement. You don't have to have an ATP to fly for them.
But people must be jumping over each other to get into airlines like that? Like, how did you manage to secure that? That's interesting.
So yeah, it was a dream come true. It really was. And I again, the two friends that I grew up flying with, Rod Kellogg and Haley Howard, I met them when I was 16, started flying with them all over the country, just having a great time, and they introduced me to so many opportunities. And then when I was in college, they actually went to Mokulele about 6 months before me, and they were both captains there. So they went in as street captains. They were captains right away, and when I saw the flying they were doing out there, I was like, guys, I would love to join you. How can I do this? So to network with the company, to sort of get my foot in the door, I bought a ticket to Hawaii during spring break from college. When I introduced myself to the company, you know, I kind of had an introduction through Rod and Haley, who were already flying there, who had the ability to introduce me to people, and that's sort of how I got my foot in the door that way to get on with the company. I flew there full time for about 3 to 4 months. Over a summer, I was living in Hawaii.
Hmm.
And then the rest of my 8 or 9 months at the company, I was part time. So I was able to pick the days during the month that I was working. And I was actually commuting from school on the weekend to Hawaii to go work. So I would do classes on like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And then I would commute to Hawaii for Friday, Saturday, Sunday, even when I was in college in North Dakota. And I didn't do it every week, but like every other week or so, I would do that.
That's a crazy commute to do.
Oh, it was awful. I mean, I had to drive down to Fargo, take a FedEx flight to Memphis, sit overnight in Memphis for 4 hours, take another FedEx cargo flight to Hawaii, take an Uber to the Hawaiian terminal, take Hawaiian to Kona, which was my base on the Big Island. I'd get there after about 26 hours. It was a
Ooh,
lot.
oh man,
Yeah.
but you could do
I
that.
did
You
fly
like
the first day. I would hang out on the beach the first day and just rest, and then the next day I would work. So,
Yeah, no,
you know.
obviously, because you would need to do that. But you could do that. You could jump seat with the FedEx guys,
I
because you have a
could. Yeah,
license.
that was the other amazing part about working for Mokulele. They had some of for being a small Part 135 carrier with only about 15 airplanes. We had Z fares with airlines all over the world. We had CAS benefits, which in the United States means that we had CAS privileges, which gives you cockpit jump seat access.
Ah,
So I could fly on cargo airlines. I could fly in the jump seat on any airline in the States. We had everything that a normal airline pilot would have in terms of travel perks. So it was great.
no,
It was awesome, especially as a young person building flight time.
yeah, I can imagine. How long did you stay with them?
It was about, I'd say it was a year and 3 months, year and 4 months total.
All right.
That was probably how long I was doing it. Yeah.
I got one of my fantastic administrators in the Mentour Aviation app actually asked a direct question about that. So I'm going to put that up on screen here. I'm going to
Sure.
have to read it off the screen as well. So can you ask Swayne this? What's the biggest pro and con of working for a small Hawaiian airline in a Cessna as compared to a much larger passenger jet in mainland USA? And what do you miss from the old job?
Oh man, that's a great question. So, if I could do the job in Hawaii today with more career progression opportunity and better pay rates, I would. I absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
I was home every single night. It was all day trips. We never had overnights. We worked half days, so it was either about 6 a.m. to noon or noon to 8 p.m. It was really easy. It was a great job. Um, but in terms of flying out there, especially as a first officer, the hourly rate was pretty low.
Mm.
And you'll find that at a lot of starting jobs. And then the career progression, building experience in larger aircraft to then be competitive, flying for a larger airline one day, you do have to make the transition up to be able to start getting into larger equipment for a better career track. So
Yeah.
you found two groups of pilots who were flying, at least for my company in Hawaii. You found people who were time building, and then you found retirees. So it was really actually quite interesting because we had, as captains, I'd say maybe half of my captains that I flew with were actually retired airline pilots. So I would have 747 captains, FedEx, Delta, United, you name it.
Sure.
And they were the captains for these brand new 20, 21-year-olds. And they were retiring because they didn't have the age limit because the Part 135 carrier doesn't have a retirement age. So you'd find people that were 65 to 75, one of whom actually was the lead test pilot for Boeing on the 787. So as a 20-year-old, I was flying with this woman named Sheila, who was a test pilot on the Dreamliner for Boeing.
Cool.
And so she was teaching everything she knew as I was a brand new commercial pilot. So that was great.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that is awesome, and I do understand that. Like,
Yeah.
if I was forced to retire and I would get a nice retirement check, and then I could see myself going to Hawaii and fly these like awesome routes in a set.
Well, you can imagine if you retire as a pilot and you go do that, you then retire. If you're part-time, you only work the days you want, and then they got flight benefits still. So they got their travel perks
Yeah.
into retirement, which is amazing, you know? Yeah.
That's awesome. I definitely see that because it kind of benefits everyone here because the airline obviously doesn't have to pay their pilots much, which they always try to if they can. Because they have the captains, they have their like probably their retirement, they're getting paid that, so they don't need much. The young guys like you, they know they're going to lose you guys. You just need the hours, and then you'll go on to the regionals, and new people will come in, and you guys get the hours that you need in order to, to jump up to the regional. So I can see that as a fairly working business model
Yeah.
for them.
Yeah, it was interesting.
That's really cool. So when you made the jump, then did you have to jump through quite a lot of hoops to get into the job you have now? Was a lot of tests and stuff involved?
To be honest, not really. So at the time, things are a little different now, but at the time, regional airlines all around the country were hiring in big waves. If you wanted a job at a regional airline and you qualified for it and you didn't have any sort of background that would make you ineligible for being hired, there really wasn't a lot. I mean, the interview was very straightforward. It was some regulations questions, but some of the things that they used to require 10 years ago didn't exist. Like if a decade ago, you used to have a lot of multi-engine flight time. They would make you take simulator tests, things like that. We didn't have to do any of that. So if you had the flight time and you had a good background, and you were qualified, I mean, the job really, in a way, was yours to lose at many regionals when you would choose to go get hired or try to find a company that worked for you.
Hmm.
In today's hiring market, it's going to be more challenging until aviation rebounds, but at that time, that it was pretty straightforward.
Yeah, because I mean, you had for quite a while there was a lot of bad slack about the regionals in the US when it came to payment, to terms and conditions, and
Right.
stuff like that. And of course, on top of that, you had a 1500-hour rule, which made it like from the onset. And I know this because I get a lot of questions about it, not because I've actually
Right.
experienced it myself, but I can see how someone having to pay around whatever 85 to $100,000 to do their training, and then having to get hold of these hours, 1,500 hours, to then be thrown into a low paying job where you spend a lot of
Right.
time away from the family, then obviously people wouldn't be training, and then there would be a shortage of pilots, and then they were going to have to start paying more. So I guess you managed to get in on kind of the upgoing curve there.
I did, and I actually witnessed the change pretty dramatically, even from the beginning of my time in college to the end. So when I came into school in 2015, you would still see regional airline jobs out there that were only paying 22 to $30 an hour,
Mm.
right? Very low for first officers. Not making a lot per year, especially based on the investment that you would make. And then aviation really took off between 2015 in the United States and up until most recently, where pay rates doubled, if not tripled,
Yeah.
to between low end of the $40 an hour range up to $60 an hour starting for first officers, which is a lot better than what it used to be.
Yeah.
Enrollment at UND tripled from when I was a freshman until when I graduated in terms of the aviation program.
Yeah,
So
and this is what tends to happen. It's a child of the market economy. It works like that. If you want qualified people, you're going to have to pay for them, and that's what we're seeing now. Now, of course, this whole Corona crisis is going to turn everything upside down once again. Are you flying anything at the moment?
I am, I'm on schedule for this month. I'm only going to be flying about 7 days though, so my schedule is pretty dramatically reduced.
Hmm.
But my actual, I guess, base rate pay, at least for right now, has not changed. And we are still flying, so it's just on a reduced schedule for
Yeah.
us. Yeah.
And like because the company that you work for now, you said is connected to American Airlines.
Right.
And American Airlines obviously has taken up on the whole the rescue package that has been offered through from the American government, which means that they won't be firing any people until at least September. But after that, all bets are off. Is that more or less correctly understood?
Yep, that's pretty much correct. October 1st is the date in which sort of is like the date everybody is waiting for in terms of pilots, because this summer sometime we'll probably start to hear
Hmm.
if airlines around the country are planning to furlough and in how many numbers.
Yeah.
Um, but you are correct that based on the package they got from the government, they're not eligible to furlough anybody if they took that money until October 1st.
Hmm.
People will know about their furlough if it, beforehand, before October 1st, most likely. But that's sort of what's going on. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
So people are
I
asking.
don't know exactly what's going to happen. It's impossible to predict. So
That's all. It
yeah.
all depends on what's going to happen with the virus and how the in the United States, obviously, how the states react to it. Here in Europe, how the different countries react to it. I'm getting a lot of questions about things like, which airlines are going to survive, and things about my own economy here, which I'm not going to take while you are on the interview. I'll take that after. So you guys who asked those super chat questions, I will take that when Swayne doesn't have to listen to it. Um, but I mean, in Europe, there's no question that we're seeing the biggest bloodbath when it comes to jobs ever. We don't have that guarantee. So I mean, British Airways, I think we're talking about furloughing or firing 12,000 people. Ryanair was saying 3,000 people now just this Friday. And it just goes on and on. So it's tough times now. Now, I do think, and I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again, that this is a temporary thing. It's going to take a few years now before we're back to the 2019 levels, but they will come back again,
Mhm.
um, unless something that dramatically happens to the virus, of course.
Right.
Um, there's not too many questions here, actually. For cargo, do you need for? Oh, okay. So there's a question here. I don't know if you can answer this, but to fly cargo in the United States, do you know if the cargo companies require 4-year degrees as well?
Most of the larger ones, I do believe, as I said, if they don't require it, they still highly preference it. So in terms of, I guess, the two largest cargo carriers being FedEx and UPS, those are very, very competitive jobs,
Yeah.
very great careers for the people who are flying there. And I'd say most probably have degrees who get hired there. I don't know the specific requirements though.
No,
So.
and it's good. Like anyone who asks these kind of questions about what you need and not, what I would strongly suggest is that you go in and if you have a company in mind, let's say that you want to work for UPS, for example, or FedEx or something like that, you will all find their websites, and on the websites there will be a career path. You press that, you will go get a full list of what they require. So that will give you a great indication of what you need before you even start applying or before you even start your training. Sometimes it is a good idea to maybe do a college degree before, and if you don't get into, like Swayne did here, into a specific aviation degree, well then take a degree on something that is not aviation related but that you would like to do. Because if there's something that we're learning from this crisis right now, it's that you might not be able to get a job directly. You might
Mhm.
do something else for a few years. And in that case, if you have a degree of something else that you like doing, well, then you can build up a little bit of salary, build up a bit of life experience doing that, and then
Mhm.
onto the train again when it starts rolling. So that's always advice that I tend to try to give to people.
Yeah, and one of the degrees, for instance, that we had at school, I personally did not go through this degree path because I had some business experience doing a few other things.
Mm,
But one of the most valuable degrees that we had at school that I know a few other aviation universities have that I would highly recommend is an aviation management degree. So at UND, they had an aviation management degree, which I thought was the best deal they had. It was a combination of a business degree and an aviation degree.
mm,
So there were flight training requirements, there were aviation training requirements in the degree, but the degree was mostly housed through the business school. So you had a combination of aviation and business background, and it was a business degree like any other, so you can still go into the business career fields in the event that aviation doesn't work out. So it was a really great thing for the people who chose to go down that track.
yeah, and that's a good point actually, because if you have a business degree, you kind of can branch out to do pretty much anything, which I would love to have had a business degree actually, because there's loads
Right.
that I would need to learn. So we have a question here for Wide World West. He's asking, "Hello from Kentucky. What's your favorite city for a layover? Love your channel."
Good question. Man, favorite city for a layover. I would say one of my most favorite actually is kind of surprising. One of the ones that came to mind first is Manhattan, Kansas.
Hmm.
So it's not Manhattan, New York, Manhattan, Kansas, actually, of all places. It has a really nice hotel. It's by the college campus downtown. It's a small town in the Midwest. It's not somewhere you would think of right away that's like an exotic destination, but there's a college campus downtown. There's a lot of good food options. The hotel is nice. That's one of my favorite layovers. Another one that I like is Cincinnati, Ohio, which is right on the river downtown. That's another kind of fun one. Those are just two that I thought of right away. So
That's funny because it is exactly if you ask pilots like where they want to stay, most people would think that it's going to be like the big cities or the big obvious things, but in fact it tends to be the things that have like your favorite restaurant or nice pubs around that you can go out and you can meet people in or whatever. And
yeah,
it is a sure sign that you have actually been flying for a while that that you come out and say that, because it just
right.
that is exactly what I've found as well. The ones that you least expect tend to be the most fun ones.
Yeah, the big cities, they're hard to get around, they're expensive, there's nothing nearby.
Yeah,
When sometimes when you're in smaller towns, people always I'll find crew members that have layovers where they go to the same restaurant every time and get the same thing, and they're like looking forward to that when they have their layover because they have their spot. And flying with experienced crew members, I've found a few of those spots through them,
yeah.
and I'd say that's one of the things that you pick up on as you start. So.
Cool. Which aircraft are you flying on right now?
I'm on the Embraer 145, so it's 50-seat regional jets, the small
Yeah.
one.
No, 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 but that's a beautiful aircraft.
Yeah.
Would if you had a choice, like you, I guess your career path, when you see your career laying in front of you, what are you hoping for?
I would love to fly for a mainline carrier one day. We have great ones in the United States. I would love to be at American Airlines one day. I won't close the door to other opportunities, of course. I think there are great airlines out there. But flying, I'd love to have experience flying wide body international at some point in my career.
Hmm.
I don't know if I'd want to do it my entire career because it's pretty hard on your body over time doing those big time changes all month. But I would definitely like to do that at some point.
And if you were to fly a wide body, which one would you like to get yourself onto?
I to be honest, like I don't really care about airplanes that much. I'm much more about like schedule, destinations, things like that. But in terms of that, I think the Dreamliner probably would be the one.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that, at least for American Airlines, they fly the Dreamliner to some of the most unique destinations in the world. So low capacity, long distance routes, right? Places like, Croatia, Venice, the Czech Republic, places like that. That's where the Dreamliner goes to, versus some of like at American Airlines, for instance, the 777 you might fly Dallas to London all month, and that's just what you do.
Yeah.
Versus you might have a little more diversity on something like the Dreamliner. So I like that about that airplane.
See,
Yeah.
this is another point that I've been trying to make in my channel for many, many years. It's interesting to see that they're the same when you come over to the other side of the pond, which is, once again, guys, what it's all about is your life quality. What
Right.
makes you a happier person? What suits your schedule, your family life, your partner, whatever. What is the best thing for you? It's not what type of metal that you're sitting inside of,
Right.
because
Right.
you have exactly the same distance to the nose cone in a 777 as you have in a 787 or an Airbus 350. So
Right.
yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I mean, how old are you? You're 23, are you?
23.
Well, you're a child. So that means, yeah, but actually we have something in common. I think both you and I were flying solo before we were driving.
Mhm. Oh, really? Yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember that. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, that was a good time.
Yeah.
Crazy the way the laws work.
No, yeah, no, no, because I remember that as well. I actually have my private pilot license before I got
Okay,
my driver's license. So I was flying solo when I was 17, and I
nice.
got I got it exactly when I could. It was part of my school that I went to, and then I had to take my driver's lessons later on.
Right.
But the point I wanted to make is that I would have preferred to fly long haul when I was your age. So
Right.
when I was 23, 25, something like that, before I wanted to settle down, then that's the kind of sweet spot for flying long haul, because you still enjoy everything. Your daily rhythm, you can still kind of do it without it being too hard on you. The older you get, the harder it becomes, at least on me. So like now's the time, man.
Right, right. I know. I'd love that. Hopefully we see some uptick in the industry, so that'll be possible.
We are going to see some real changes to the industry. Exactly what these real changes look like and how they are going to affect us, we don't really know yet. But
Right,
it doesn't have to be negative. There can be, in the far end of this, there could be something positive for this. There has to be. Um,
right.
but like the airline industry that we grew up with is not the airline industry that we're going to have after this, unfortunately. And exactly how it will look, I get that question all the time now.
Yeah.
I have the same crystal ball as everyone else do, so I can just sit here and guess. What do you
I know. I'm kind of with you on that. One thing for the people watching that I kind of want to iterate. There's a lot of people out there on, and I appreciate what you said there, because there's a lot of people out there on YouTube who you can find videos where they're taking their experience and knowledge and trying to give people advice based on the industry trends.
Hmm.
I really would not listen to that advice, because there's not a great way for any of us to predict the way that this is going to happen. The best that anybody like we can do is share our experience with what's happening right now
Hmm.
and what we're experiencing on a daily basis. For us to try to give advice based on what we think is going to happen, just it really isn't realistic. So um, things are changing too quickly. It's just not something that's possible. So I try to stay away from career advice based on the way the industry is going, especially with challenges like this, just because
Yeah.
of that.
I
So
I try when it comes to career advice, I'm
mhm.
very careful. When it comes to actually sitting and trying to figure out what's going to happen, that's something I do quite a lot on my channel.
Right, right.
Mostly because it's interesting to see whether or not you get it right or wrong. It's not
Yep.
it you know you have as much capacity to guess this as I do.
Right.
And some of the things that have happened historically, as in economical downturns, for example, they tend to reflect onto the industry in a certain
Yep.
way. We haven't had a pandemic though. We've had SARS, which was a local epidemic, but we have never seen a pandemic, and we've never seen how, when people are scared and they don't want to fly and they're afraid of the air quality in the aircraft on a global scale, how that is going to affect. And I think this is something that we will sadly learn now for the next. But something that is actually positive that I read about now is that the apparently in China now, as they're starting to get back from the virus, now they've had it for about 4 months now. Apparently the tourist sites are booming again because
Interesting.
because
Yeah.
people are just craving to go out and go
Right.
back to see stuff and experience stuff. And I can feel that because like I went out with my kids for a bicycle ride today, and that was a happening for me. Like it was
Mhm.
an emotional thing to go out
Right.
and smell flowers and see stuff that I've seen 1,000 times before. So I think that the experiences that people will get when they go to these real tourist attractions and stuff now is going to be much stronger when they can appreciate the fact that they can go there and see it.
Right.
And if that is the case, then we might be looking at a V-shaped recovery, at least for the travel business. Because if people are just jumping onto aircraft and going, well, then this might go quicker than the 2-3 years that we're all fearing that this will take. But
Right.
the next few months we're going to see.
Yeah, the summer will be telling.
Yeah,
So.
absolutely. Are you still flying any smaller aircraft?
I have not recently, although I have a plan in about 3 weeks to go down and start to get single engine current again. I haven't done that in a few months, so I want to get back into it a little bit because I miss general aviation so much. I miss flying smaller aircraft, so I want to get back into it.
Cool. Now there's some questions here in the normal chat about the fighter video that you did, the
Oh yeah,
Raptor
sure,
video,
sure.
because that's gone booming. Like that has over 1 million views now. I saw. I think I'm gonna put it here in the background so people can see what we're talking about.
Yeah.
But what's the like? How did you manage to do this? Like, what kind of connections to the Air Force do you have?
Sure. So actually, my boyfriend Sam Ekholm, he's the public affairs officer for the F-22 Raptor demonstration team for the Air Force. So
Ah,
his job is to market the airplane, the F-22 Raptor, for the Air Force the same way my job is to talk about the airlines on YouTube. So we both have a very similar passion in that he's really good and passionate about aviation media and knows how to do these things, and I do the same thing on the civilian sort of airline world. So that was sort of the connection there. I have worked with the Air Force beyond that before. I flew with the United States Thunderbirds in an F-16 about, I guess, a year ago, which was
Ah,
so cool.
I want to do that.
Absolutely loved it. And yeah, so I've been very fortunate to work with the Air Force a few times to sort of show the story in a few of their aircraft that way. Yeah.
Cool. Now, like, because that's like I was watching it, and it's a very, very high quality production video. That one,
Yeah.
you can definitely tell when you're sitting at home in the sofa making videos when something is really, really high production value. So
Right.
I was really curious about that. But another thing that strikes me when you say that is you say that you're working with promoting the airline through your YouTube channel. Does it mean
Mhm.
that your airline is actually has actually put that into your job description to do that?
So it's actually not through my specific job description, but I do in fact have a contract for the things that I do in terms of filming the airline outside of my job role as a pilot. So it's a separate contract,
Ah,
but it is something that I've actually partnered with them on. And to get approval, it's a little different, I know, in Europe, but for us, we made some really big progress. I was able to get the first approval in the United States to show Part 121, filming inside the jet in like in flying scenes in the cockpit, things like that. It's really, really prohibited in the United States, very difficult to get approval.
yeah.
And I worked for about half a year with my company and also the FAA to find a policy that we could adhere to for filming in the cockpit,
Hmm.
and being able to show some of those flight ops that haven't been shown on YouTube, at least in the United States before. So to be able to do all of that, I do have a partnership with them for
Yeah,
it.
that's kind of what I was guessing because I get a lot of questions about that myself.
Yeah,
It's like, just show me a day in the life of an airline pilot or something.
right.
And I was like, would love to.
I
However,
know.
no.
I know. Yeah, it's very, unless you have, I mean, my whole thing was when I went through, there are people out there I've seen online who will try to show clips from work and stuff like that, sometimes without approval. It's a really dangerous game to play, especially with your career.
Yeah.
And I've seen people who've gotten into big trouble for that. So I really do my best to like work with the company, make every single thing, cross every T, dot every I, make it all approved,
Mm.
so that I'm helping my career, and also the airline's liability isn't extreme either. So
No, that's perfectly
yeah,
okay. And I want to make a huge point of that for everyone who's watching now to say that like this is the way that it works. I was in contact with my airline as well about doing, for example, briefing videos. Like I want to show
right,
people how we do a proper approach briefing, and I want to do that in flight if it's possible because it becomes much more engaging then. And my
sure,
airline's response was like, okay, but we need to give you a chief pilot approval to do that. It needs to be, you need to have a written approval so that you can show because
mhm,
the authorities will question it and there needs to be a record
right,
to show that this has been done exactly according to the rules. And then nothing can be like obviously there needs to, under no circumstances can the safety of the flight be impeded. That means that someone has to be flying the aircraft and doing all of the stuff if someone is filming. So it's not like you just put up GoPro up and you do it. It is something that really really needs to be taken care of and be done in a proper way. And another way that I have, like, the problem that I have with it personally is that I'm normally training, so I'm a check airman, a training captain,
okay,
and it wouldn't be fair for me to sit with, even if it's just a GoPro that's mounted, because it's someone I'm training potentially, and when I'm flying, that's what I do.
right,
I can talk about it later, but for me to
yeah,
do it in the cockpit, I'm not talking to you now, by the way, Swain. I'm just talking to my audience who's asking me to do this because
sure,
it,
sure.
it just
Yeah,
it,
yeah, no, that's exactly. It's really, really tough. And I mean, for instance, like when you talk about the challenges that are faced, like I'm limited by the FAA to a very specific set of criteria for in-flight cockpit scenes. So I can only have footage from Part 91 flights, which means without passengers, from a handheld camera from somebody who's sitting in the jump seat recording it. I can't even mount a camera on a suction cup.
yeah.
There's very, very specific criteria that I've been given, at least right now. Things could change, of course,
Yeah.
but those are the criteria that I was given. And so I just have to work around that to make it work.
Yeah.
It's just kind of the way it is.
Yeah, but
So,
I think it's good for people to hear and understand
yeah.
that it is not like, no matter how many pictures you see from people who are filming their approaches from a GoPro or whatever it is, the change it should be that there's a little bit more slack rules in Europe than it is in the US.
Mhm. Hmm.
It's more up to like your individual responsibility rather than anything else. But generally speaking, it is very, very hard to get that kind of approval to do it the proper way, which is why, the kind of videos that you can expect, from example, from me would be if I am at a flight school and I'm filming someone who's flying or something like that. But from me actually operating the 737, it's going to be simulator footage, and that is it.
And as you know, when you run a popular channel, the more eyes that you have
Oh
on
yeah.
content, that's when the critiquing and criticism and rules go higher. So you will see people out there who upload their own footage, but until there's significant viewership, nobody seems to care. It's the videos and the content that gets high viewership, is where you have to be very careful.
Yeah, and
So.
there's another problem with that as well, and that is the fact that even if you have a tiny little channel, if you manage to capture
Mhm.
something that someone think is cool, and then they share that to a friend who also thinks it's cool, who shares it to another friend, this is what happens. So you might sit there with like 20 subscribers. You upload a video from your cockpit flight when you are a first officer on the training or whatever. You upload it to Facebook or something, and it goes absolutely viral. And you have no control whatsoever of where that is and in what circumstances it's used. And then the newspapers, the press comes in and they grab that, and it's like training pilot X is flying, is showing off his flying skills, and you have no control of it anymore. Like
Right.
it is a scary, scary world on social media if you start to get into this. So I'm really happy that we brought this up actually. So Evan W is asking, Swayne, I'm from Toronto. How do you like the YYZ? I don't know what that is.
Oh, the YYZ, the airport there.
YYC, yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah, I love it. We fly to Toronto. I've been to Toronto and Montreal quite a few times through LaGuardia and JFK. That's how I've gone up there. I like it. It's pretty easy. I think that the absolute best part about Canadians in terms of the airports is they know how to de-ice. They're very, very good. Their system for de-icing and dealing with winter weather is much better than many of the airports here. Um, in Chicago, for instance, we actually de-ice and anti-ice the airplanes at the gate. So there will be trucks that come and spray the airplanes down at the gate, which means that our holdover time, if there's actually bad weather, is very short by the time we get to the runway.
Hmm.
Whereas when you go to a Toronto or Montreal, they have amazing systems with these huge de-ice pads that have electronic guidance and automatic trucks that are driving around your airplane, spraying it, just doing all this crazy stuff that we don't have in the States. So
Yeah.
I've noticed that, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I don't know. I like we drive. Obviously, we fly all over Europe, and you notice when you get up to the northern countries that are using
Right.
snow, they're like, yeah, okay, so, and they know
Easy, right?
the difference is that they know exactly what we're talking about. I
Hmm.
I flew into Italy, close to Venice, a few years back, and they had like the snowstorm that decade when I flew in there. They literally have never
Yeah.
snowed down there, and it was
Yeah.
like it's crazy. Yeah, they had one truck, like you've seen the kind of trucks that they use to clear the runways up, for example, up in Canada,
Hmm.
when they go like in a V shape and they clear the whole runway in one sweep. These guys,
Yeah.
they had one tractor with one scoop that was trying to clear the runway in a proper blizzard. Like it was crazy. And we were standing by the gate, and we had, I think there were three 737s standing by the gate at the same time, and they would start the de-icing on one, and then they would be de-icing the entire aircraft. And at the time that they had de-iced the aircraft, the holdover time was over, so they had to restart it. So the passengers sitting on board in my aircraft, looking out the window and just seeing this de-icing truck running circuit after circuit around the same aircraft until they ran out of de-icing fluid, where they had to go and fill that up. And obviously then the aircraft was completely full with snow.
And then they heat it up, and yeah,
I,
yeah,
well, anyway,
yeah.
it's funny the things that you see. There is a big difference when it comes to
Oh yeah.
airdrops, that's for sure. So Mr. MCD is asking, what is your best advice on dealing with trainees who already know it all? $5 to help fix the in-up vacuum. That was hilarious.
Wait, what was that you said?
Is that $5 to help fix the in-up vacuum? That was hilarious.
That's funny. Yeah, I mean, so I guess is the question more about like students who already know all the answers and things like that?
Mm.
Um, I don't know. I mean, to be honest, I don't know if maybe you as a check pilot, you might be able to answer this better than I do because to be honest, I mean, I have my CFI and double I,
Mm.
my instructor ratings, but I actually didn't do a lot of flight instruction for time building. So I don't have a lot of experience working with students
Yeah.
per se, other than through like Bold Method, for instance. So you probably would be better at answering that than I can be, I think.
Yeah. So when they come up, these guys that do exist, and it's a huge problem from a CRM point of view because you know that the guys who comes up and think that they know everything, they don't. First of all, it's impossible to come up as a trainee and know everything. You might be very good, and sometimes they really are very good, and that's where they've gotten this delusion that they actually know everything. So you kind of have to deal with these guys in a way where you kind of gather up ammunition. Like you fly with them for a day, you see that they have this tendency to be a know-it-all, and you know that if I would let this guy go out onto the line and fly with non-training captain, these non-training captains would go absolutely ballistic with this dude, and you would have a CRM fallout, which is very, very detrimental to flight safety. So you know that this is the kind of debriefing point that you want to give this girl or guy, and you just over a day sit and you write down the things that they obviously do not know, things that you kind of let them dig their own grave a little bit. So you relax a bit, you let them sit there and tell me what to do, which they frequently do when you get close to this type of guys, and you let them get themselves into a situation where they don't know what to do anymore, and then you help them and you explain to them and you train them as you do as an instructor, and then you use that as a perfect point when it's time at the end of the day. Like, listen, you might have been flying with me today, but if you would have flown with another captain which is not trained to deal with this kind of behavior, they would have just ripped your head off when this opportunity comes. And I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen in the simulator when I do simulator checks, when you have that one first officer and that one captain, and the captain just sits there and you can see him go redder and redder in his face, but he's not going to do it because it's on a sim check and he knows he's going to get his ass kicked if he explodes, but eventually he cannot hold it and it will explode on the tiniest little detail. And then the first officer will kind of look out. Well, but that was just a tiny. Why do you react like this? It is the most glorious debriefing points that you can have when you're sitting like, how? Why did that happen? Why do you think he got so angry when you told him that he was 5 knots over his speed? You know, could it been that you potentially have been pissing him off for 4 hours straight now, and that was the thing that broke the camel's back?
Right.
So these are the kind of things after a while you learn. The important thing is, of course, not to become pissed off yourself, because then you're going to lose the kind of learning battle at the end. You need to have shown them, like, listen, this, you do that again, this is going to be a problem for you. And you are so good, you obviously have learned a lot, like you know all of this stuff that you've been studying. Don't blow it on being a douche. Like, don't, just like CW Levoyne said on the last live that I had, don't be a douche. Don't.
Right.
So there's a lot to get from that. It's a great question. I can actually do a full video on that, I think. P Hightower is asking, wait, I'm missing a few here, just make sure that I don't miss anything. Are you guys allowed to film in the cockpit for yourself, like to watch back privately? I mean, the same kind of rules does apply, and I wouldn't want to do that either, because you kind of, when you're getting filmed, at least in my case, you know that you're being filmed, that it's not great.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, for on my end, the same as he said, the same rules do apply. The rules don't change if you're just filming it for yourself. And in fact, one thing that I think you just mentioned that's also important is to take in consideration that there are other people that you're working with who probably don't want to be filmed.
Also.
It's pretty rare to find another pilot that you'll be working with who's comfortable operating in the airline environment, being recorded doing anything.
Yeah.
For instance, when I fly with people and I'm recording, those are people that I've actually pre-coordinated weeks in advance that we're going to be doing this. And it's people who are comfortable with it, who we've worked out the details. We have a briefing sheet that we go through with before we do these sort of operations with filming. They're well aware of the process. Just showing up with a camera and expecting for someone to be okay with that, you're putting yourself at a lot of risk for breaking rules and then somebody potentially reporting you. So
Yeah.
I try to stay away,
No.
you know?
Yeah, very good points. Very good points. I see there's some good in the normal chat as well. I'm trying to not only the super chats here. Swayne produces the best HD videos on the net.
Thank you.
Let's see. Why did you choose your current airline?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it was a combination of a few things. I had a few friends who were already flying for the company, so I had some connection with the actual employees of the airline already. I sort of felt at home. That was a big thing for me. Having people that I knew who were experienced in the company, I've always based where I go try to work on personal connections because I found that those are the most valuable for gaining experience and having resources for you when you start somewhere. Even if another airline might sometimes have a better offering when you know more people or you know the company better, sometimes that ends up being more beneficial to you in terms of career development. The other side was that they were willing to partner with me on in terms of the video project, some of the filming operations. That came after I was hired, actually. That was something that I sort of proposed after the normal hiring process, but the fact that they were willing to do that was a big plus. And then the other part being that it is connected to American Airlines. So we do have the opportunity, once, of course, the industry spins back up, to transition to American Airlines one day. Having that sort of insurance policy where I know that I have career progression one day is really, really valuable compared to potentially being at a regional airline and not progressing to a larger carrier. I can still apply to other airlines, of course, but having that pathway that's more or less laid out is definitely a big benefit in my book.
Yeah, very good. That's a slick answer. Great.
Yeah.
So
and ask quite a few times if you haven't noticed.
Yeah, that it flew like that was a very flown answer. Very good. So what changes do you see, if any, as far as flight school after this epidemic is gone and flamed out? Do you think there's going to be any changes to flight training?
Yeah, I do see changes. Right now, obviously, there are a lot of flight schools that are even not training. And sometimes, at least in the United States, that's based on state law because states are what's mandating different businesses to be open and operating. I can see in the training environment people being more careful about cleaning aircraft. In the airline world, you'll find it more common for the aircraft to be cleaned by a cleaning crew and maintenance technicians and things like that. You don't always see that in the training world. You don't see aircraft being cleaned in terms of the cockpits and things like that. So I could see flight schools having policies where they keep a bag of sanitation wipes and they ask each crew to wipe it down before they get out of the airplane for the next crew. Those are things that we didn't have to do at school that I could 100% see them doing in the future.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to go even further than that. Actually, I think that it's probably going to be included in the syllabus, as in just general kind of like hygiene guidelines and what to do when you're leaving an aircraft, be it in a flight school over to another crew or in an airline environment over to another crew. I think that this has been such an enormous kick in the teeth for the industry.
Big way.
That it's going to be, we're going to see some changes, and we're going to think in a few years that it's silly, but right now it's not. So I think that we'll see some changes. When it comes to training, no, the aircraft flies the same now as it did before the pandemic. So I don't think that we're going to see much of that. But there will be some additive onto this, just like there was a lot of security being added after 9/11. There's going to be a lot of this added now, and it's going to be. I don't know how fun it's going to be to be an airline passenger for the first few months after this, but we'll see. What happened to Levi Chavez? Still with Envoy?
So that's another pilot at Envoy. He's a captain on the Embraer 175 to my knowledge. I actually haven't met him, although I've had friends who have worked with him before. So yeah, he's around. He works for Envoy.
Cool. I don't know who that is, so I'm not going to do any questions.
He's an employee of the company that I work for, and at one point he was creating content about the airline track that was somewhat similar to, I guess, what I've tried to do as well.
All right, very cool.
Yeah.
So Les Chase just reminded me that I did a super chat question very early on that I forgot about. Would it not pay for low-cost airlines to fly cargo only for a while to keep flight crew ready when the COVID-19 is around? Great live streams. Yeah, Les, I was actually going to take that up when I've let Swayne go. But yeah, I think so. I think that airlines, if they could, they would right now. But
They're doing it for us in the United States.
yeah.
So I mean, I have not on my airplane, but we have had a handful, at least at my airline, of cargo only flights on the Embraer 175. And some of the larger companies like Delta, United American, all of them are operating international cargo flights
Yep.
without passengers.
Yeah,
So
like any kind of income at this point is going to be greatly appreciated, and the fact that the cargo rates went up with almost 3 or 4 or 5 times what they were before the crisis would of course mean that there is money to be had, and where there's money to be had, the airlines want to be and take a piece of it. But it doesn't mean that all airlines are suited to do it or can do it or even have that possibility in their operations manual, which is another thing. Like, it's not as easy as it seems to just change over to other type of operation. So yeah, I do think that some low-cost airlines probably will. We'll see now. I think maybe the train has already left the station when it comes to that, but there might still be someone that jumps onto it. Wide World West has another question for you here. As a first-generation pilot, did your family freak out at the thought of you flying aircraft? I'm currently having that issue.
interesting. Yeah, I've actually no. So for me, my family was actually very supportive. It was funny. My dad was a business school professor, so when I was 15 or 16, you can imagine, I wanted to become a pilot. He was like, "All right, well, pitch me the idea," essentially. So you can imagine 15-year-old Swain, I'm sitting here in Starbucks with my dad, showing him a presentation that I literally made on my computer about the industry growth, what I wanted to do, how the process works, how training works, what it looks like. And I literally pitched the idea of me becoming a pilot because that's the best way he knew how to go through it. And similar with my mom, although she was very supportive, I think she was nervous. Both of them had a little bit of anxiety about it since it was unfamiliar, but they were both very supportive. If you have family that's concerned, I mean, the best thing that I can say that you do is find a way of showing them the realities of flying in terms of safety records, in terms of the process. Show them that you're competent enough to handle it. If you present to your family in a very concise, confident way that this is what you want to do and you have a plan for how you're going to do it, it's much better than just sort of throwing the idea out there and going in the dark. If you say, here's the process I want to go through, here are the things that I want to apply for, and here's the investment that it's going to require and what the payoff in the end could be, that's a much better way to go about it, especially if there's some hesitation from family.
Absolutely, because it will show you or it will show them that you are dedicated to it, that you've actually
And you're
researched
sure,
it.
yeah.
Yeah, that you're not just, oh, I want to fly fast plane,
Right.
but you actually understand what it's about, because a lot of this is about that. Like, it is, I see a lot of people who comes in with very blue eyes into this and think that flying is all about like traveling and being on beaches and stuff like that. And you have to have gone past that and understood not only the good things, but also what the bad things are, what it's going to cost, what kind of financial position you will be in after your training is done. Is there a possibility for you to get out of the deep financial hole that you might be in? So yeah, no, I think that is a great idea.
Yeah, the other side of that is oftentimes families who are concerned, maybe it's because they don't have resources, they don't have people in the family who are involved in aviation, they don't have a background in it.
Yeah.
So another thing that you can do that I did was I reached out to as many pilots as I could find online. I literally just started emailing. At the time, blogging was like the big thing. So I remember two big bloggers, Carlene Pettit and Eric Auxier. They were both airline pilots in the US. I reached out to them when I was first starting getting interested. I asked them how it worked. They sort of served as like the earliest form of mentor to me. And I used their advice as a way of showing my family that I was trying to network, that I was trying to actually find out from aviation professionals what it was going to be like.
Yes.
So that's a big thing that you can do early on.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I love the fact that your dad had you pitch the idea. Like that's
Right.
something I'm going to take with me for my poor
Yeah.
little kids as well. Pitch me, and I want a
Right.
nice pitch deck.
Yeah, yep. Exactly. He was very supportive, so.
Oh, awesome. Devin Castle, was there ever a situation you had trouble dealing with during a flight? If so, what steps did you take to deal with it?
Sure, yeah. I guess the first one that comes to mind, so when I flew for Mokulele in Hawaii, there was a flight where we had an emergency between it could have been a much worse emergency. Fortunately, it was not. We were flying between Oahu and an island called Molokai. So we're flying IFR in the clouds, instrument flying, full passengers, all that stuff. And I started smelling a really strong burning smell in the aircraft. And my captain, like I kind of looked at him, we looked at each other and we're both like, "Ooh, like that's not good at all." Right. So it was like a very strong burning smell. We started seeing sort of like a smoke coming through the ventilation system. There was no fire indication. There was no warning message, nothing like that. But of course, the first thing I did, the captain took the controls because I was flying at the time. I pulled out the emergency procedures checklist. I told ATC we were declaring emergency, that we were going to descend there was the Molokai airport right nearby. We were under instrument flight rules, so we were at a certain altitude, but we told them we were going to descend right away to get out of the clouds. And we went through the checklist for different things like electrical fire, cabin smoke, things like that, which required us to close air vents, turn off the air conditioning system. And what it ended up being was the air conditioning system essentially burned out in the airplane. So it was sending a rubber smoke from a compressor that had locked through the airplane.
Yeah.
It wasn't actually a fire, which was very fortunate. But it was a situation that could have been pretty bad, and there wasn't a way to tell exactly what was going on. So that's sort of what we did. And in the end, I mean, I've had a few different emergencies in airplanes, as I'm sure you've had unique issues and things like that over time. You'll learn that when you get into aviation as a pilot, it's really not, for the most part, these big dramatic issues. You take a breath, you open the checklist, you follow each one, you don't skip items, you read each one by one, and you just take your time and you're very methodical and you go through it that way. And that's how the best results happen in terms of dealing with issues. So.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Very good.
Yeah.
And smoke, anyone who's been on board an aircraft, or any pilot has been on board an aircraft that has smoke, knows that that's smoke and fire. They're up there among the worst thing that you can ever deal with, because it's terrifying for passengers, it's terrifying for crew, and it really puts you on the spot when it comes to, can you actually keep cool and deal with the checklist and do the right things in the right order, because you don't. Most in most emergencies, you have plenty of time, but in a potential fire situation, you don't. An aircraft will go from a fire that you lose control over until a smoking cloud of dust falling down in about 16 to 20 minutes if you have no control of the fire. So it's not something that you want to have at all.
Yeah, and I mean, at least in our airplane, the other side of it that was really interesting, that was sort of unique to our operations. So we were flying Cessna Caravans, of course, which doesn't have a cockpit door. So with the 9 passengers right behind us, I mean, you instantly hear sort of the commotion and fear spreading throughout the cabin, because they're right there looking at you, pulling out the checklist, doing all these procedures, and they're right over your shoulder.
They hear you saying "Mayday, Mayday, Mayday" on the radio.
Right. Yeah. So that was. Well, ironically, the other sad part about that was when I had to call our company operations on this island to let them know we had declared an emergency, that the fire trucks on this airport were going to be rolling, although we planned to come to our gate as normal if everything was fine. And what I didn't realize was that when I was transmitting to company operations, there was actually a customer for our next flight who was standing right next to the desk listening to all of this. So then that turned into a whole nother issue too. Of course, that wouldn't have changed anything that I did, but you can, it just, it's the way things happen sometimes.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a company issue. Like you need to have a secure channel that you can communicate on. And that should not be next to the passenger.
Well, and yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like in a smaller operation like that, the airport's literally like one tiny little building. It was just like one little radio. That's pretty much it. So,
yeah, no, those kind of things unfortunately do happen. Right. Brown Sugar Baby, thank you very much for your support. Swayne, can you get Mentor pilot an experience flight on a fighter jet? Yes, can you?
I would love to. Actually, I know this is probably disappointing, but the United States government doesn't allow foreign nationals inside any military aircraft. And I've tried because I've actually had people that have tried to help sort of go down that path, and sadly, they don't let anybody unless you're a citizen.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah,
It kind of makes sense as well.
yeah,
So there are plenty
yeah,
of fighter jets out there that I'm sure
right.
myself on one of them. So
Yes.
cool. The bad is being in the system for 2 weeks from Fred Hill. I don't really understand that. Michael Stern, do you have a chance to see your friend Haley Howard?
Yeah, so I haven't seen Rod and Haley in about a year, although I'm trying once things start to open back up. That's one of the first visits I'm going to make is go see them because, like I said, I did grow up flying with them, flew with them in Hawaii, some of my best friends in the world. So I'm excited to go see them soon.
Excellent. Cool. Good. Listen, I've held you here for over an hour now, so we're gonna have to start rounding this up. I think that I have asked all of the questions that I wanted to ask as well.
Okay.
So thank you very much for taking the time to get onto my channel. It's been a pure pleasure to have you here. And do you have anything that you want to say? Like, do you have a new video coming up that you wanted to push for, or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the two things that I want to say, I guess in terms of video content that's coming soon, I did make a video about, I'm in the production process of a video explaining each of different time building jobs. So some of the things we mentioned earlier, I've created a video where I really detail all the different tracks, the most common tracks that people use to gain flight experience so that you can qualify for an airline one day. So that'll be in the next few weeks. Other than that, though, guys, I mean, right now we're all dealing with really unique issues in the aviation industry. Things are changing quickly. Don't let that dissuade your passion from getting involved in aviation. As a pilot, I still think this is an amazing career. I love my job. Things will be hard over the next few years, but in the end, this is an amazing career, and you shouldn't let just one event or one downturn dissuade you from getting involved because aviation has been through it before and it's recovered before. So.
Amen to that. I couldn't have said it better myself. Swayne, thank you very much. I'm going to leave you here. I'll send you a message on Skype later on to when I finish off, because I'm going to go and take some of these super chat questions that I've missed.
Okay.
We'll keep in touch and take care of yourself. Stay safe out there, and I'll talk to you later. All right?
Perfect. All right. See you later.
Thank you. Bye. There we go. So that was awesome. It is such a pleasure. I'm actually going to go back to the live stream. There we go. Full screen. Like, I love doing these live streams, guys. I hope that you guys do as well, because doing interviews with other YouTubers, other pilots out there, it really opens my eyes as well up to not only the differences between the different operations, between, for example, the United States and Europe or wherever these people are from, but also how similar our situation seems to be, and how similar our experiences are, and how we look at things in a very similar way, which makes me really, really happy. It makes me think that what we're teaching, when we're teaching people to fly, all, be it here in Europe, or be it in the United States, or be it in Hawaii, is very, very similar everywhere. And there seems to be a lot of, like, you speak to someone with a huge military experience like H.W. Lemoyne, he will say something that's very similar to what someone like Swayne Martin, who has gone through the civilian side, is saying, and which I'm saying. So it's great, and also they're really cool dudes. Like, it's really it is really, really nice to be able to reach out to people with big YouTube channels, or who have a lot of experience within a certain field, and them actually wanting to come on and talk about their passion and talk about their experiences stuff. So I really hope that you like it as much as I do, and I'm going to continue doing it. I see that you guys have already started coming with suggestions about who I should have on next. I have quite a few people that's already in my lineup for the coming live streams, and I don't think that you are going to be disappointed. But do please continue to send me your requests, all right? Because sometimes you guys think differently than I do. So I might be really interested in another YouTuber, another Instagram profile, or someone like that. And you might be really interested in hearing from someone who's actually like working on the ground around the aircraft and want to see their perspective of things. So maybe some air traffic controller, or someone who's working in a different part of the industry, and you might know someone who does that. And especially, I'm listening a lot to my Patreon crew. Okay, Patreon, you see up here. They influence me a lot when it comes to this, and I do reach out to them and ask if they have any special people. I have one of my patrons, Will, has given me a great suggestion that I'm going to look into. But if you want to be kind of part of the work that I do, that be it coming with suggestions about new guests, or be it coming with suggestions of new videos, or whatever it might be, do please consider to go in and check out the Patreon crew. Right, you can go in and you can support with as little or as much as you like. It doesn't really matter. But you guys are my failsafe. I actually made a like a likeness to you guys being my first officers. Like my Patreon crew is like the first officers that I fly with. I send out my videos to them so they can preview them, and I count on them being honest and telling me, no, actually, Peter, this one you need to think about this. Maybe someone will take offense if you say it like that, or you missed something over here. And if they just tell me what I want to hear, then I might miss that, and I might send something out which is subpar, something that doesn't have the quality that you guys deserve. So I need as many people as possible in my Patreon crew in order to make that failsafe as good as possible. And also, it does support the channel. And right now, and I don't know for how long, my Patreon crew, together with whatever I get from YouTube, is actually what's holding me and my family up. Like, this is my full-time job right now, because I had a super chat question here, and I have a lot of questions in the normal chat asking, are you on furlough right now? And for the last 2 months, yes, I have been on furlough. There was also someone asking about if I'm part of the ERTE, which is basically the government protection and help program in Spain. And yes, I am. Like anyone who is in my company, and there's a lot of different airlines who are based in Spain and in different parts of Europe who are now taking avail of government support for employees, not only in the aviation business, but in the hotel business, in the travel industry, everywhere. And it is a really, really tough time right now. There's no question about it. But I am so grateful that I have this second leg to stand on, which is my YouTube channel, and to be able to produce quality content to give to you guys, to come up with new people to interview or do new videos. I try to do 2 a week. I probably won't be able to keep up that rate, by the way, but at least 1 video a week. This is now what fills my days. You know, when I'm thinking about or working during the week, this is what I'm working with, and my Patreon crew is my support crew in that. So a huge thank you and a huge shout out to everyone who's part of my Patreon crew. I'm really, really glad that I have you. So without further ado, I'm gonna go through the super chat questions here and see which ones that I can actually respond to and all. If you have any more questions that you want to ask me now, then the next 10 minutes or so, I'll take a couple of more super chat questions, and probably some questions from the normal chat as well, and then I'll call it a day, because it's actually been almost an hour and a half now, which is kind of the limit of how long I do this, the live stream. So Scott Lowry is asking, hi Peter, which airlines do you think would survive? Now, I don't, there are several reasons. Scott, I can send you a message later on, because Scott is part of my Patreon crew, so I can send him a message. But I can't really go out here and name airlines that I think would survive. I have a responsibility as a public person that actually reaches a lot of people, and I wouldn't want to go out and say something that would turn out to be wrong and could potentially hurt airlines out there, right? So what I would say is that the cash is king in this situation, and airlines that have had that has been very successful and managed to gather up a lot of cash, they will be able to weather this storm better than airlines that doesn't do that. On top of that, it's also becoming very, very clear that if you have a flag carrier, someone who is connected in one way or another to a government, they are the ones that seems to be getting the bailouts first. Whether or not that is fair, that's a different discussion, but that seems to be what's happening right now. So, you know, the big guys is probably going to survive through government bailouts, if by nothing else. I mean, Alitalia has already become state-owned, as far as I understand it. And then you will have the other ones who might not get state aid, but might have a lot of money to keep them weathering through the storms. Those will survive. And then you will have people, airlines that falls not on any of those two groups that's going to be struggling. It all depends as well on how long this will take, of course. Let's see, there were some other things here as well. So, hi, will they produce any tri-jets in the future? Probably. I mean, if the tri-jet is what is required from a like a thrust point of view. So I know that, for example, Boom, the new supersonic jet is a tri-jet, from what I understand. So they need obviously the extra engine power in order to push them to the sound barrier. But generally speaking, the jet engines with the huge bypass ratio that we're seeing being produced right now, they seem to be doing just fine on two engines. And the less engines you have, the cheaper the airlines that it is for the airlines, because the engines are the single biggest expense on an aircraft. They cost millions of dollars each. And also the maintenance on them is extremely expensive. So you don't want three engines if you can do the same job with two, basically. So Fred Hill, can you update us on the European airlines? Like I was saying, I can't really say much more than that. It wouldn't be right for me to do that. And thank you from Robert Goldwyn. Thank you for truly great content. Well, that's great to hear. I'm so happy that you guys are here and that you're enjoying what I'm doing. I will be here and I'll continue to create new content as long as you guys want me to. But like I said, do come with your suggestions. And guys, if let's say that you don't want to become a patron, you don't want to join up with my Patreon crew, that's cool. That's only about 0.03% of people watching my YouTube videos that are part of my Patreon crew. But you want to be able to connect to me anyway and ask me questions now and then I highly recommend you to get the Mentour Aviation app. Now, I know that you've heard me say that hundreds of times, and you heard me say that on my YouTube videos and stuff, and that's just because I want that app to work. It is my baby. I have created that. I have my admins who are doing a fantastic job on their spare time, coming up with new kind of things for you to do in the app, discussion items, news, loads and loads of news from the aviation world, both the ones that get pushed out, but also the ones that are just taken from all over the web and they're gathered inside of the Mentour Aviation app. So I want everyone to have it downloaded because it is free to download. It doesn't cost anything. You can turn off the notifications. If you go to settings and you don't want notifications of news coming up, then you can turn that off so you can completely customize it. But I want as many as possible to be in there because it becomes a way for me to communicate with you and also for you to communicate with me. All right, you can just tag @Mentour and it will send me a message. And if I have the time and I see that coming up, I do answer it. You can ask anyone in the app about that. And I do live streams in there. Not these long live streams, but shorter live streams that are a little bit more intimate, because it's not too much people there. So I can kind of have more of a discussion going rather than here, which I have like 1,500 people that are watching. So, do get it. And also, something that I do have in the app that I don't, that you can't find anywhere else at the moment is the training collections. So a few years ago, I sat down inside of a simulator and I did about 2 hours worth of different training collections. Okay. Like you're sitting inside with me on the jump seat, seeing me do these things. Now, you can't go into details. It's not a virtual reality game, so you can't zoom in, but you can see how we work together, which was the point. All right, I wanted to show how a captain and a first officer work together in, for example, an engine failure after takeoff, or a Cat 3 approach and go around, or a TCAS maneuver. These kind of things are in there. So please go and check it out. And I'm saying now that there's no audio coming out. I don't know why that is because I have set that up this time. But anyway, so that's what you can do. If you get, there is a link to download the app here in the description of the video. Just go to mentorpilot.com/apps and you'll be able to download it absolutely for free. So let's see, there's some last super chat questions here as well. Have you ever piloted a helicopter? I don't know if that was for Swayne Martin. If it was, I apologize, but I have not, and I would love to. I would love to get my hands on a helicopter, actually, because it looks very cool. Josh Green, hi Mentor, I love supporting your channel. Can I get Instagram shout out? Yes, of course, at Aspirational Pilot Josh. At Aspirational Pilot Josh. Go and check out. I haven't checked it out myself yet, I think, or have I? I'm gonna have to go and look at it later on. Keep up the fab streams and videos. Too many questions, so comment. One of the best lives I've seen. Education is a filter. Obviously, Swayne passed the test. A uniquely well-spoken guest. Thank you, Swayne. Clear skies ahead. I'll send you. I'll tell you. Tell him when I call him up later that you said that. That's very, very nice. David McCready, why do the lights in the cabin flicker and AC stops momentarily just before engine starts? Well, that's because we are using our APU in order to use basically all of the pneumatic force from the APU, all of the air that we need to start the engines taken from the APU. So when we're starting the engines, we turn off the air conditioning and we use all of that air to start rotating the engine. And then once we have started both engines, well then, instead of using electrical power from the APU, then we switch over to the two generators, the engine-driven generators. And that's the flickering that you see. So as we switch 1 and 2, you'll see the lights flicker twice. That's what that is. Josh Green, are there any news on the Airline Pilot Club? Yes, well, no. We're still working, right? We are, for example, right now we have a really, really good English language course. So if you're out there and you're struggling with understanding what I'm saying, what Swayne was saying, well then go to the airlinepilotclub.com and you can enroll yourself in the English language course. It's a 6-week course that you can do. We have a really good instructor that have now done a few courses, so Frank, he knows what he's doing. So we're doing that, and we're also churning out new blogs about what's happening in the airline industry based on your feedback. So if you do have questions about, well, is this the time to become a pilot? What about my flight school? What happens if this comes back again? Send all of those questions in, and either me, but most likely my partner in crime here, Mr. Andy O'Shea, is going to have a look at it. And if we see a lot of questions on the same topic, then that's included in the semi-weekly blog that is being there. So you can go in, you can read the blogs. There's loads and loads of good information about becoming a pilot. But when it comes to the actual funding, the indicative assessment, the insurance policy, the schools, all of that, that's something that's still ongoing. We don't think that it's right to launch the club into this pandemic. We want to see where this pandemic is going before we push that forward. So it will come, but it might take a little bit longer. We should have launched last month, but obviously we're now waiting until we have more and we can come out and confidently say that, listen, you should do this in order to become an airline pilot. You should go into these schools and stuff. When it comes to me and when it comes to everything that I do, it's all about authenticity. Like, it has to be, you have to be able to believe in what I say, and I won't go out there and sit and say that you should go training right now unless we actually do have the figures to back it up. So as soon as we can, and as soon as we have a better picture of what's going on, the Airline Pilot Club will be opening up, and we hope to have as many of you as members as possible, because especially the indicative assessment is going to be absolutely fantastic, right? It really will be. I think that you guys are going to really thoroughly enjoy that. It might not give you the answer that you want sometimes, but it's going to help a lot of people to work on the right things before they start their flight training. Okay, so Max Witt, don't forget that patrons get access to Discord filled with amazing people. Yeah, that's another thing. Like, when you join Patreon, it's not only work. It's not like I'm only going to put you to work when you come in there. You are going to get different, depending on what tier you get into. If you, for example, join at the $10 tier per month, it means that you get premium access to the app for free. You just have to send me your username, your chat name, nickname in the app, and I will give you premium as part of it. But also, every single one of my patrons gets access to my Discord server. So in my Discord server, there's only patrons, and they can communicate directly to me there, and they also can communicate with each other, which is a great community. Like, these are people that really want to support the mentor job, what I'm trying to do. So you'll only get across like positive, constructive people, a lot of experience, a lot of ex-military guys, ex-airline pilots, for example, that are kind of in there now trying to support what I'm doing, which is a fantastic thing, by the way. But you'll be able to, if you're a young person, for example, ask them for advice. So yeah, Discord has become a really, really good additive to my perks inside of the Patreon crew. Hi to Swayne and Mentor. You're both awesome, from D. Anna. Thank you very much. That's great to hear. And if you switch to Airbus, could you maintain the 737 type rating? Yeah, I can. You can keep any type rating that you have alive, providing that you go and you do your skill tests, your license proficiency checks that you need to do every year. You can also let it go dormant for a specific time. I think it's about 3 years, if I'm not mistaken, where you can go in and you can do another sim check and pick it up again. But if you let it go too long, then you might have to do either a refresher training course, or you might have to do a full type rating course again. So you have to keep track of that. But yes, you can sit with several type ratings still active. It doesn't mean that you will get to fly it though, but you can keep it up. Yeah, that's it. That's the last super chat question, guys. Thank you very much for everyone who's been here watching. I hope that you've enjoyed this. There will be another live stream on Wednesday hopefully at 9 o'clock local time here. So that is 19 UTC. So you can set your clocks already. I will announce the guests when we get a little bit closer. All right. Until then, have an absolutely fantastic day. Take care of yourself. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.